All right. Hello, everyone. So, I want to just take 10 minutes or so to talk about selecting a topic for your research. So, there are a number of ways to do this. And maybe if you've taken English 102 or another class, or sorry, English 101 or another class like that, you might have done a persuasive essay where you've selected a topic. Now, the topic that you choose is going to guide the rest of your research. And there are sort of good topics and maybe not so good topics for what we're doing. That's not to say that any topics are bad topics. I think that all topics are worth exploring and thinking about, especially depending on your interests. But one way to do this to begin is to think about things that you're interested in learning more about. Great way to do this is to create lists. I really like lists of 10. So things maybe that you're interested in learning more about, 10 things that you could talk about for hours, 10 things you wish you had known by now, 10 things you wish everybody else knew. And from that, right, you can think about selecting that research topic, right? So I'm going to skip over a slide here in a moment. But again, the topic that you choose should be something that's interesting to you, that's going to make your life a lot easier in the long run. So, a good topic in general is something, one, that's interesting to you, something that you care about. Two is something that's open to debate or discussion. Now, while sort of the greatest of all time uh, essays are maybe interesting, they're going to lean you more towards opinion, and that's going to pull you away from research. What do I mean by that? What I mean is if you're researching who is the greatest musician of all time, or who's the greatest basketball player of all time, or what's the best movie of all time, that's going to be really, really hard to quantify. That is to explain why it's the best thing. Is the greatest musician the person that's sold the most albums, or is it the person that's had the most influence, or is it the person that's underrated but still a really technically proficient musician, or is technical proficiency separate and there are maybe good musicians who are not technically proficient? So again, it should be debatable but not necessarily something that's going to lead towards opinion. Now, number three is that it's not something that's overly polarizing. At its core, a research essay is still essentially a persuasive essay, which means topics that are polarizing, that people have really, really strong opinions about on either side, are going to be really difficult to write about. So things like abortion rights or gun rights or immigration or taxes, those are all going to be really difficult to write about because people have really strong opinions. That's not to say that you can't. It's just to recommend that if you are thinking about one of those topics, that you think carefully about how we can have that discussion. And then number four, there's available academic research. That there's stuff that you can go to Academic Search Complete or Google Scholar, and you can find peer-reviewed or scholarly articles about that topic. Then you have a foundation on which to build, right? Because part of a research essay is saying this person says this and this person says this, and here's where they agree with me. And then number five, and this will be part of our work this quarter, is why is this something that needs more research? An example would be something like climate change. Climate change is something that most people agree exists. So we don't necessarily need to research climate change more. We might need to research certain solutions or certain approaches more. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to research climate change as a whole. Let's look at another example. So a lot of students, especially in recent years, have wanted to talk about sort of the dangers of social media. And this is something that we hear a lot, even in our common discussions, is brought up a lot. I have kids. It's something that, I talk about with other parents and things like this. So when I think about the dangers of social media, I can go down that list of things that make something a good topic. So I could say, number one, it is interesting to me. It's something that I care about. It's something that I've talked about with other parents. However, I don't know that it's really open to that much of debate. I think if you start talking to people, most people will agree that social media does have a dangerous aspect to it and it can be really harmful. So, most people are going to agree that social media has at least some dangers, not that it is by and large dangerous in and of itself. There are definitely some good qualities of social media. The next part I could do is that it's not incredibly polarizing to say that social media is dangerous. I don't think that many people out there will disagree with that sentiment. Of course, there will be some. So that's good, right? It's interesting. It's not too polarizing. What about academic research? There is a lot of academic research out there on this topic, and that might be the dangers of social media in terms of effect on teenagers, effect on self-esteem, effect on or addiction, something like that. Uh, it has been researched really extensively, so I'm not sure what more we can add to this in terms of further research about the dangers of social media. Now, what I can do is I can instead pivot a little bit away from the dangers of social media, since we might all agree that, yeah, there's some dangerous or harmful aspects of social media. Instead, what I could do is start to think about government policy and social media, and then research what the government or of a particular area, right, a country or state or city, should be doing to address the dangers of social media for a specific group of people. And this, of course, is actually pretty debatable. We look at what's happened recently in Australia at the time of filming this. Teenagers are banned from using social media in Australia. We have periodically different platforms that governments are regulating or talking about regulating. So that is something that we can begin to talk about. Now, in thinking about regulation of social media, I have to think about who can do something and what they should do. Should the government have a policy? Should each social media platform enforce more policies? And that creates a whole other discussion about why they would want to do such a thing, given that social media platforms want to make money. Let's look at another. So, My Neighbor Totoro is the best anime ever. Okay, great. Let's go down our list. It is interesting to me. I happen to like Totoro. Is it open to debate and discussion? Yeah, sure. We could have a discussion about what the best anime is. You and I might disagree, and we can go down the list. It's not overly polarizing, right? The chances of people really getting upset or arguing or something like that is very low. So far so good. It's interesting. It's open debate. It's not overly polarizing. But when we get to number 4, you'll see why maybe this isn't a great topic. And that's because there's not a whole lot of academic research. Again, think back to how do we decide what makes an anime the best? Is it the number of people that have watched it? Is it the impact on other anime? That's really, really hard to quantify, especially if we don't have that academic or peer-reviewed research. And lastly, it's opinion-based, so it doesn't really need a whole lot of research. However, I can do the same thing as I did with social media, and I can pivot slightly, maintaining that same core concept and making it something that is going to be easier to research. So, for example, we could research how movies like Totoro demonstrate and reinforce cultural values or ideas. How does this video help change discourse or dialogue on certain issues? So from there, I can kind of bridge into something that's going to give me a little bit more to write about, and I'm not going to exhaust all my options. Now, I'm going to look at one more example that's maybe a little bit more in line with our course focus. And I'm going to show you how I might take that big topic that I'm interested in and begin to narrow it down, because narrowing is at the core of good research. We want to narrow and narrow and narrow down that focus, and then we can always expand back out if we need to. So if I take a broad topic, like what makes us human, and this is, in all transparency, one of the reasons that I chose this as a core topic, because we can use this topic to provide a framework or a guideline or an example of how to narrow something. So I'm going to start with this really big topic. What makes us human? Well, I could write an entire book about this, or somebody could, right? All the different things. And there are all sorts of different chapters that might be in that book. So I want to choose one chapter from that book, and I'm going to choose language. Okay, language makes us human. That's still really broad because I have all sorts of aspects of language. I have written language, spoken language, I have nonverbal communication, I have different languages, different dialects, and things like that. Okay, so I want to narrow it down. I'm going to narrow that. It's going to be narrower to written language, just written language, how we write things. But that's still pretty broad because that could be how we write, how writing affects our brain, how it helps us transmit ideas over long periods of time. So I'm going to narrow it even more, narrower. So maybe I want to look into how written language allows us to create sophisticated understanding of the world. And even there, it's really broad because we have to ask questions like, what does it mean to be, what does sophisticated understanding mean? And what does the world mean? When we talk about the world, are we talking about societies? Are we talking about cultures? Are we talking about psychology? Are we talking about geographically? Are we talking about, physics? What are we talking about when it comes to this? So hopefully you can kind of see from this little video that when you think of a topic, we really want to dig into it. And this is one of those places where throughout the quarter, we're really exercising our critical thinking skills, which is one of those core soft skills that we need, not just in our personal lives, but also in the workplace. We need to be able to think about a topic and dig into it and problem solve. And that sort of painful quality of thinking, of trying to review things from different angles, that is the exercise that's going to strengthen those muscles in our brain and help us develop these skills that we can use later. Okay, so there you go. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, or recipes, please let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you all in the future.